Well, hey everyone, this is the Afterthoughts. So we're going to chat a little bit about the sermon as we've been going through the Psalms. This is now third sermon in the Psalms, and really the second week into doing the devotions. And so Nick wrote those last week, and we went through those, and he chose Psalm 12, which we finally settled on. Psalm 12.
Yeah. I chose Psalm 13 first, but then
Yeah, I heard that, and I had it written down,
I was-
Psalm 12, and then you guys said, turn to Psalm 13. I was like, okay. And so we had a good time today.
I did realize I should not switch up what I'm doing my sermon on midweek because it's all I think about. So yeah,
Yes.
lesson learned.
Yes, but it's interesting as we start out. It's funny because you're just switching around, and the key term for the day is a duplicitous heart, and
I can't keep straight. Yeah,
that was one of the terms that really came out because I've been with the work I do is I'm studying virtue, and I've been thinking about this a lot with that, like what causes that duplicity. And you start out with this story where the heart was turned one direction and then veers off. And a big part of that, and I have this conversation with my boys a lot, and even with Stacy, that we have to focus our mind on what is good. Like you have to first decide on that. And if you begin to think, and that's almost kind of what your story, where you begin thinking, I deserve something else. I want. When your mind begins to dwell, you will see that shift.
Right.
And so I think that's why, really, as we talk about what is good and talk about that praise and talk about having that heart with God, that's what keeps us from veering. Because even in your story, the guy he wants intimacy, he wants something he's not getting. Those are those passions, and that's what can lead us astray if we don't stay focused, which I think is why we've been trying to get people in the Psalms and reading and to focus the mind daily. Like, what is our great good, and are we really worshiping the Lord?
And we're only 2 weeks into the reading every day, and there have been people that have talked to me and said, this is interesting. This is making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then when because we have everybody come up and collect pom-poms for every day that they read, and you can just kind of see the kids getting excited and talking about, the Psalms that they read and how many times they read. And it's just really bringing the families together and bringing us all into one heart and hopefully one focus.
And that is one thing, and not so much with the sermon, but with doing that daily. Like even in our family, I think we dropped 5 in the jar because we read all the Psalms, but we didn't read every day because there were 2 days things went sideways.
Which, by the way, is really irritating people. That's my rule, that it's the day and not the number.
Which I get it.
But I'm trying to make a point here.
I get it. Well, and to be clear, it was Levi, because we've been reading through the New Testament, and basically if you read a New Testament chapter every weekday, you can read the entire New Testament in a year. So I asked him, are you reading daily? He's like, well, I just read Tuesdays. I was like, you read them all on Tuesday? He's like, yeah, I just read Tuesday. I read 5 on Tuesday. And I'm like, okay, rock on. Well, it's going to get through the New Testament. I get it.
It is, yeah.
But there is a value for that daily, which again goes back to the heart. It goes back to, we're trying to turn our hearts every day or at least regularly. And I think that's a word of encouragement to people, is that, sometimes stuff just happens.
It does,
You don't stress and tell the boys, they're like, we didn't do it we got to do 2 today. And we did. It's a good thing with the Psalms. You can do that. Like, it doesn't take a whole lot of extra time.
No,
but
very quick.
We're being faithful. So
yeah, it's very quick. But I mean, but there's so much in each one of these,
So a couple of other things that stood out I particularly wanted to hit is I had fun. So again, part of this is sharing the thoughts as you're preaching. I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing this difference back and forth between dishonesty, flattery, boasting, rebellion. So I started thinking to myself, all right, so those are vices. Those are bad habits.
Yep.
And you had mentioned flattery is not good. That when and it's interesting. I normally think of flattery as I've linked it with like overly friendly. It's friendliness gone wrong to excess, and you had connected it with dishonesty, which can be, that when you flatter with, and you're saying things that just simply are not true, then that's another issue, because now you've done an injustice on that side.
Well, sure, it's not just that though, right? Like, it's also with the wrong heart, with the wrong intention.
Right, but that's why flattery can almost take on different forms
Yeah.
because even if, I'm like, hey, I really like that shirt and I do, I'm just not the kind of person who would tell you.
But
And
then
if
that's
I'm
not,
doing that, I'm doing it for a reason.
well, that's not, I mean, not necessarily. Like sometimes you can, if you're doing it for a reason, like
Right,
later to go, hey, I like that shirt, gonna
right,
have it, you know?
right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just want to make sure that, you know, affirming each other, we're supposed to affirm each other with
Right.
words of encouragement and, seeing the things that are good in people, but it's when it takes that turn, it becomes flattery and
It's for those right reasons. And so that's why I had placed them on sort of a spectrum in terms of dishonesty, boasting, and rebellion. Those, and I took rebellion as the term for like those who wouldn't submit, those who like
that
kind of thought over
arrogance
God.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, there's no master
So
above me.
those are defects, and then the flattery, like I said, I put as excess. But really, those virtues in the middle: honesty, friendship, humility, and submission. Like that's why, as we were reading the Psalms, I'm realizing, when he's saying these things are bad, I think this is one of the ways when we approach Scripture. Well, if these are what's bad, what should be the
What's
good? Should I
good?
focus on? And so those four things: the honesty, the friendship, humility, submission, they really kind of go hand in hand. And particularly when we lack these things with God, it's going to derail, and we're going to, the whole dishonest, boasting, rebellion, those are very self-centered
Right.
kinds of things. Like
Yep.
that's usually what fuels those. So, quote of the day, you didn't say so many of these words, but to be the good father, we must let our kids eat it so they can learn to stand. So, there's some
But I mean, how does that
words
not?
of
I mean,
wisdom.
it does. I mean,
It's truth. It's
if
truth.
if God didn't allow us to, pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off, we would be weak. And He wants us to be. I mean, there's a strength that comes with
Right.
this trust and trusting in His promises. There's a strength that comes with it because the more we exercise that trust and faith, the better it gets.
Right.
Remember, we got to let Him eat it. He lets us face our mistakes and a lot.
Well, and I had thought about that with the whole soft society, and every little discomfort must be addressed the way kind of we operate now. And I had thought about this, and I was thinking, like with my boys, even some of the Psalms we had asked, what have we been delivered from? What are we? And Joel kind of said, I don't feel like anything's really attacking us. He's like, I don't feel like we have those kinds of things right now,
Yeah.
which is nice. But then we're like, well, there is that element when those difficulties do come, that's going to be so much more important that they learn how to regulate that
Yeah.
and how to handle that.
I mean, we've insulated, and as a culture, we're insulated too because, I mean, we're in a military town, and there's a lot of people here who understand what the attacks are, the physical attacks, that are around the world, but we've insulated everyone else from that so much that it's a really good life in a way. It's a really easy life.
And so to finish up, because of the towards the end, you gave this illustration of, and we'll just simply say somebody who's on drugs is going to offer you some tools, and if you offered some tools, most people would believe you. It comes from that source, and again, I think that's why. Again, our study, the study I do with virtue, is that makes the source good. God is the most virtuous source. He cannot lie. He is good. That's why we trust Him. That's why everything comes from Him is pure. That's why we should become good sources. We should become those like Him, that people would trust us. And one of the last things you said, and I hyper marked it, because you talked about aligning our desires with His. And the reason I hypermark is because before I started studying virtue, I would hear this all the time, but I would also ask the question, how? How do I just pray harder? And that's why practicing these things and everything we've kind of talked about, identifying what is good and true, really understanding the fear of the Lord, understanding the scriptures and what He values. And then there is that sense in our minds, if we don't buy into that, then we're not going to feel it. We're not going to align with that. And so I think this is why, again, in my walk, I was always frustrated because I knew what I was supposed to do, but how do I make myself want to do that?
Yeah. Because it's a big difference.
Yeah, it's huge. And even today, it's fun because I came in, my back, like we were talking, my back hurts. I was cranky. I'm people
very
out.
cranky.
I was very cranky. So I know I'm not supposed to be. I know I'm not supposed to have an attitude, But again, that's those passions. But I think because I know and because I'm practiced, that's what keeps me at least in the midst of this. And I think this is what people need to hear this. Like, I did not feel good this morning.
I mean, messing with you did not help.
Well, you didn't know, but
Oh yeah,
that's why
I could tell. I could tell, but I
that's
was
why I
just
get
trying
a
to
stake
cheer
in
you.
the eye to basically say you need to intervene.
You need to get him under control.
And that's what she did. See, I knew that. I knew that you weren't, you didn't know. So for me though, again, this is why even when reading these Psalms, like there's that element. It's one thing when you read them and everything's going fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing when you read them and you really are you just don't feel good. Like something's off. And I think this is the encouragement I want to give people is that again, this is why we have to be practiced. And David had the opportunity to practice, and when he had these times, it's why he didn't cave.
So I've had that same spiritual frustration. Because when you meet people who are spiritually mature, and it's this frustration that you have is that idea of well, just do it. Like you just do it. Like, what do you mean you don't know how to do it? You just do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can sit here and I can say like it's a hard thing to do, and it's like you're saying, it's something it's not easy. Yeah. And if we just say pray harder or have more faith, or like, I think we're just selling people completely short. Mm-hmm. So what I just heard you say was you identifying, the true and the good first. Like, how do I line my will up with his? And, I got to start homeschooling my grandbabies, and I could not get them to memorize this for the life of me until this week. But we start out every morning saying, hey, what do we seek? What are we after? And they finally got it, the true, the good, and the beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that really is the first step to all of this, is identifying what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. Like, so how do we do it? And yeah, you're right. That is what we have to find first.
And all those qualities, I think it's funny you mentioned, again, if we lack humility, that's going to derail, because I'm always going to be seeking my, if it's a pride issue. And again, when it comes to honesty, if we're also dishonest with others, we might end up being dishonest with ourselves. We end up becoming our own worst enemy. And so I think this is why that Christ-like life, all of those characteristics, all of those things are so important. And I think that's why in cultivating those, becoming like Christ, when the world falls apart, like what happened with David, in different scenarios, there were multiple times, you have not only that character to sustain, but also you're locked into the rock of Christ, and you're not going to falter. It's not going to feel good, but I think this is what I think people who aren't there yet, that's the encouragement, is that, in order to get there, here's the path.
I'm not sure if I'm there yet. Like, I mean, like, I'm not
or not,
sure.
No, not where you at least know you should be.
Yeah. I mean, that was something with, I had a conversation, we had a discipleship group, and somebody kind of called me out and said, almost as like, super nice about it. And it was very, like, the conversation was great, but it's like, it's never enough. And it's not like sanctification. Like, we know from the beginning to the end, it's a constant state of walking with him and towards him. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I don't know if anybody's there yet. No. Some people feel like they are, which means they're not.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Looking forward to next week.